Hello, welcome to Microfiche Microphone. I'm Micah, and on this channel we look at microfiche from the past, old newspaper articles in the public domain. We look at them with our modern eyes, our modern perspective, and see what we can learn from them. On this microfiche time capsule, we are looking at the Gentleman's Magazine from April 1800. And this article is entitled Dr. Glasse on the Plurality of Worlds. That immediately caught my eye, as you can imagine, because, I know the concept of a plurality of worlds. Did they really talk about, multiple dimensions, multiple, worlds in 1800? And is it the same as the concept we have today, or is it different? And so, anyway, I thought that would be really interesting to look at. So, just to let everybody know, it is too hot today to close the windows. So I have a little bit of background noise, airplanes going overhead, maybe a little bit of traffic. I hear some birds, there might be people talking. Anyways, normal city life kinds of sounds. Anyways, so please don't hate me for that. I can't stand the heat if I close it today. So it's that warm. Anyway, so let's take a look. Mr. Urban, April 3. I was rather surprised to see, the quality is quite low, so sorry about that, but I do not have a better version. So I was rather surprised to see the following remark by such an able scholar and divine as the Reverend Dr. Glasse in his lectures on the festivals, I think is what that says, in which he speaks with contempt of that incomprehensible notion, a plurality of worlds. Is that, say, page 50? I'm not sure, it might be missing a lot of letters. Wise and good men will think differently on various subjects, and surely they may do so without any injury resulting. Why then should a sublime and favorite idea with some be treated by others with a degree of contempt which it does not deserve? Ooh, he's criticizing Dr. Glasse for thinking that this is ridiculous, yeah? We cannot give up at once our preconceived opinions, but charity, as well as truth, should induce us to speak with caution, and to decide with temper on opinions which, perhaps, we have not examined, or that do not perfectly agree with our favorite notions. I like this. Open-mindedness, yeah? The idea of the plurality of worlds is not agreeable to the Hutchinson philosophy. Mr. Hutchinson was but a man, although an extraordinary man. I have examined some of his writings, and cannot allow, with the late Mr. William Jones, that he was a man sui generis. I'm going to look that up really quick. Constituting a class alone, unique. Yeah? Okay, so that he was a man sui generis, so constituting his own class, yeah? Mr. William Romaine, educated in the same school, was very angry at Mr. Herschel for pretending he had discovered a new planet. Really? For, says he, there can be no more than 6. Okay, the Georgium Sidus he opposed with as much spirit and sense as he did the famous Jew bill. Okay, this is crazy, some of the things that they say. Okay, I'm going to look that one up too. Georgium Sidus. The Georgian planet? Oh, okay. So he promptly named it the Georgium Sidus, the Georgian planet, in honor of his patron, King George III. Is that, what planet was that? Was that Venus? Oh, Uranus. Okay. Interesting. So they discovered Uranus, and they're like, hey, let's name it Georgium Sidus, or the Georgian planet, in honor of King George III. Yes? Who was king at the time? But people are saying, no, they can't be more than 6. Well, clue, ding dong, there's actually 8. Yeah? And for a time, they thought there were 9. So, they can't be more than 6. Why did they think there couldn't be more than 6? Is that some special number? Just because you can't see it with the naked eye means that it can't possibly be true? That is so crazy to me, because of Galileo was centuries before this. That's just so weird. I'm actually just going to look really quick. When was Galileo? 1564 to 1642. And this is 1800. This is 150 years plus after that. Like, and they're still debating whether or not there can be more than 6 planets. This is so funny. But I love the point of the author, though, saying, hey, stop like making fun of other people just because you don't understand their opinion. Yeah, they're allowed to have their opinion as much as you are. I like that. So, anyways, let's keep going. But to return to the idea of plurality of worlds, it certainly is not opposed by Holy Scripture, and it is agreeable to the best reason of man. If existence be a blessing and reason a privilege, why should we suppose that this blessing and privileges are confined to, what does that say? Surfaces? Is that what it say? As to this world, confined to, I'm not sure if that's what that says, but that's my best guess. Okay. Who shall limit the parental affection, the extensive benevolence of the Most High? Yeah? If God is all-powerful, why couldn't he create more worlds than one? Yes? That's interesting because that's not at all our concept of a plurality of worlds today. Plurality of worlds I would think of as more like multiple dimensions. Yeah? And back then they literally were talking about planets. They didn't believe there were more planets in the entire universe. And as soon as they started discovering planets, they're like, no, that's not can't possibly be a planet. Because there's only 6. Why would there only be 6? I don't know how they came across that number and been like, that must be all there is. I guess that's because those are the ones visible with the naked eye. But, like, why couldn't there be more? I mean, I think there's more than we know about today. We just have to be patient to continue to wait until science catches up with it. But the universe is something that's almost not been explored compared to how much of it there is. The same with the oceans, yeah? A lot of it was not explored. Anyway, the author of The Pursuits of Literature says, Herschel, with ampler mind and magic glass, midst worlds and worlds revolving as they pass, pours the full clustered radiance from on high, that fathomless abyss of deity. That doesn't even rhyme. Dang it, if you're going to do... How does high rhyme with deity? It doesn't. Ugh. Okay. I love how they like quote some sort of little like verse, and that's supposed to be proof of something. Dude, people wrote verses as well as this person writing this article, so how is it more convincing with the verse? It's not. Anyway, I think it's funny. In the 2 last lines, I think the poet is remarkably and unfortunately obscure. Who and what is the nominative case to the last line? There are wanting notes upon notes to explain this, but perhaps the writer designed it as a specimen of the... Oh, God. Latin drives me crazy. I don't speak Latin. Okay. Omnia ignotium pro magnifico est. Okay. I, sir, have so poor a taste that I cannot admire what I do not understand. Verax. Okay, let's look up what that means. Okay. Everything unknown is taken as grand. Everything unknown is taken as grand. We exaggerate the importance or difficulty of the unknown. So let's reread that. So there are wanting notes upon notes to explain this, but perhaps the writer designed it as a specimen of the everything unknown is taken as grand. I, sir, have so poor a taste that I cannot admire what I do not understand. Verax. So, all right, so if I'm understanding the article correctly, the author is upset that people would dismiss a new scientific discovery out of hand just because they don't understand it and they can't understand it with, like, religion. I think that that's a fair assessment, and I think that that's fair to say, hey, people, calm down. Like, this is still a thing. It doesn't mean it's not true. It just means you don't understand it yet. And it's okay not to understand something. You don't have to understand everything. But it doesn't make it not true. Yeah? I do appreciate that. And I do appreciate this idea of don't be afraid of something unknown just because it's unknown. It doesn't mean it's groundbreaking. Doesn't mean it's like really crazy. It just means you don't understand it, and that's okay. Yeah? But don't think it's like a bigger deal than it is. It's just a discovery. It's a scientific discovery of Uranus, which means there at this point they considered there to be 7 planets. And I guess they hadn't discovered Neptune yet. And like that's perfectly legit, you know. Like, let's see, when was Uranus discovered? 1781. So that was quite a while back, yeah? William Herschel discovered it. Okay, now let's look up Neptune. This is 1800, or when this was written, right? 1846, so it was about 50 years later at this point. That's why they thought that there were 7 planets. And Pluto was discovered, I believe, in the early 1900s. 1930. Yeah, so yeah, at this point, they were convinced that there were 6 planets, yeah? Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, yeah? And then someone discovered Uranus, so now there's 7. And once they discovered Neptune, there'll be 8, yeah? And then they discovered Pluto, and then they thought there were 9, and they discovered that there were other planets in the same orbit, and that would mean that Pluto can't actually be a planet. Yeah, it's a dwarf planet, which means that technically there are only 8 planets in the solar system. And so that is what we accept today, since the technical definition of a planet has been decided. Anyway, I found that really interesting. I like that this author is extremely open-minded. They seem very ready to accept new scientific discoveries, and they don't think that it means anything necessarily about anyone or any religion at all. Just that it doesn't have to mean anything. Just accept it because it's fact. You don't have to understand it, but don't get upset at other people who do. But this idea of plurality of worlds, I think, is interesting. Just that concept that was difficult for them. Like, what? There's more planet than one? Like, that can't be true. Why couldn't that be true? It's interesting to me that they immediately dismissed that out of hand, just based on the Bible. But, the Bible isn't a scientific book. So, it's not going to describe every scientific theory. You know what else is not in the Bible? Kangaroos. Does that mean that they don't exist? Of course not. Not everything is mentioned in the Bible. It's okay. So, you know what I mean? So it's a dangerous thing to take religion too literally, especially combining it with science and making your scientific discoveries contingent upon what kind of things are described in your religious texts. Because that doesn't make sense. It doesn't go together. I would ask any critics of that statement that since kangaroos were not mentioned in the Bible, how do you reconcile in your mind their existence if they're not mentioned? And the same thing with, quote-unquote plurality of worlds, which in this case is just silly. Right? It's not even about multiple dimensions like we talk about today, which is what I thought this article was about. It was literally about the fact that they discovered a new planet. Yeah, happens. And what do you want me to do about it? It doesn't change the fact that it is there. The fact that it's not mentioned in the Bible. I wonder why people used to, in a religious sense, cling to this idea of only having 6 planets. So why did religious people think there were only 6 planets? Oh, there's a Wikipedia article on astronomy and religion. So there's Galileo, Newton. Isaac Newton was Catholic. All right, I'm going to reread that section in this article because I want to just get a better idea of it. Okay. Mr. William Romaine, educated in the same school, was very angry at Mr. Herschel for quote-unquote pretending he had discovered a new planet. He wasn't pretending, he did. 4 says there can be no more than 6. Why couldn't there? I'm going to look up William Romaine and let's see if this is in his article. William Romaine was an author. It looks like he was also a cleric, evangelical divine of the Church of England. Okay, so he was a pastor, yeah, and he was a very religious person. And, but it doesn't specifically say anything about Herschel. All right, I'm going to look up discovery of Uranus. History, discovery. Okay, Uranus has been observed on many occasions before its recognition as a planet, but it was generally mistaken for a star. Possibly the earliest known observation was by Hipparchus, who in 128 BC might have recorded it as a star for his star catalogue that was later incorporated into Ptolemy's Almagest. The earliest definite sighting was in 1690 when John Flamsteed observed it at least 6 times, cataloging it as 34 Tauri. The French astronomer Pierre-Charles Lemonnier observed Uranus at least 12 times between 1750 and 1769, including on 4 consecutive nights. Sir William Herschel, there we go, observed Uranus on 13 March 1781 from the garden of his house at 19 New King Street in Bath, Somerset, England, now the Herschel Museum of Astronomy, and initially reported it on 26 April 1781 as a comet. With a homemade 6.2-inch reflecting telescope, Herschel engaged in a series of observations on the parallax of the fixed stars. Herschel recorded in his journal in the quartile near Tauri either a nebulous star, perhaps a comet. On 17 March he noted, "I looked for the comet or nebulous star and found that it is a comet, for it has changed its place." When he presented his discovery to the Royal Society, he continued to assert that he had found a comet, but also implicitly compared it to a planet. "The power I had on when I first saw the comet was 227. From experience, I know that the diameters of the fixed stars are not proportionally magnified with higher powers as planets are. Therefore, I now put the powers at 460 or 932, and found that the diameter of the comet increased in proportion to the power as it ought to be, on the supposition of its not being a fixed star, while the diameters of the stars to which I compared it were not increased in the same ratio. Moreover, the comet, being magnified much beyond what its light would admit of, appeared hazy and ill-defined with these great powers, while the stars preserved that luster and distinctiveness which from many thousands of observations I knew they would retain. The sequel has shown that my surmises were well founded, this proving to be the comet we have lately observed." Interesting. He actually thought it was a comet at first, and so he increased the magnification of his telescope, but it ended up focusing past the comet because it's quite a powerful telescope, which meant that the comet, the planet, the Uranus, and it ended up making Uranus very blurry, so it's very hard to see. Whereas all the other things in the picture were all super sharp, like the stars and everything, farther out, because it wasn't that far out. That is fascinating, and they didn't put it together at that point. So when did they realize that it was a planet? Herschel notified the Astronomer Royal Neville Maskelyne of his discovery and received this flummoxed reply from him on 23 April 1781. "I don't know what to call it. Is it as likely to be a regular planet moving in orbit nearly circular to the sun as a comet moving in a very eccentric ellipsis? I have not yet seen any comma or tail to it," which, comets have. So that's why they were so perplexed. Although Herschel continued to describe his new object as a comet, other astronomers had already begun to suspect otherwise. Finnish-Swedish astronomer Anders Johan Lexell, working in Russia, was the first to compute the orbit of the new object. Its nearly circular orbit led him to a conclusion that it was a planet rather than a comet. Wow. Berlin astronomer Johann Albert Bode described Herschel's discovery as a moving star that can be deemed a hitherto unknown planet-like object circulating beyond the orbit of Saturn. Bode concluded that its near-circular orbit was more like a planet's than a comet's. So he discovered it in 1781, and it took 2 years for people to say, actually, it's definitely not a comet, it's a planet. And it's just farther out than Saturn. Yeah? The object was soon universally accepted as a new planet. By 1783, Herschel acknowledged this to Royal Society President Joseph Banks. By the observations of the most eminent astronomers in Europe, it appears that the new star, which I had the honor of pointing out to them in March 1781, is a primary planet of our solar system. In recognition of this achievement, King George III gave Herschel an annual stipend of £200 on condition that he moved to Windsor so that the royal family could look through his telescopes. Sure, why not? I'd take that. Okay, the name of Uranus references the ancient Greek deity of the sky, Uranus. Uranus? Yeah. Known as Caelus in Roman mythology, the father of Cronus, Saturn, and grandfather of Zeus, Jupiter, which was rendered as Uranus in Latin. It is the only one of the 8 planets whose English name derives from a figure of Greek mythology. The adjectival form of Uranus is Uranian. The pronunciation of the name Uranus preferred among astronomers is Uranus, with stress on the first syllable, as in the Latin Uranus, in contrast to Uranus, which stresses the second syllable as a long A, though both are considered acceptable. I apologize, astronomers. Uranus. Yeah. Consensus on the name was not reached until almost 70 years after the planet's discovery. During the original discussions following discovery, Maskelyne asked Herschel to do the astronomical world the favor to give a name to your planet which is entirely your own and which are so much obliged to you for the discovery of. In response to Maskelyne's request, Herschel decided to name the object Georgium Sidus, George's star, or the Georgian planet, in honor of his new patron, King George III. He explained this in a letter to Joseph Banks. Yeah, we did look at that earlier. But Herschel's proposed new name was not popular outside of Britain and Hanover, and alternatives were soon proposed. Yeah. And Jérôme Lalande proposed that it be named Herschel in honor of its discoverer. Swedish astronomer Erik Proserpine proposed the name Astraea, Cybele, now the names of asteroids, and Neptune, which would become the name of the next planet discovered. The name was supported by other astronomers who liked the idea to commemorate the victories of the British Royal Naval Fleet in the course of the Revolutionary War by calling the new planet even Neptune George III, or Neptune Great Britain. Imagine if it was called that. A compromise Lexel suggested as well. David Bernoulli suggested Hypercronius, okay, and Transaturnus, yeah. Georg Lichtenberg from Göttingen suggested Austrea, yeah, a goddess mentioned by Ovid, but who is traditionally associated with Virgo. The name Minerva was also proposed. And then in March 1782 treatise, Bode proposed Uranus, the Latinized version of the Greek god of the sky, Uranus. Bode argued that the name should follow the mythology so as to stand out as different from the other planets, and that Uranus was an appropriate name as the father of the first generation of the Titans. He also noted the elegance of the name in that, just as Saturn was the father of Jupiter, the new planet should be named after the father of Saturn. Bode was, however, apparently unaware that Uranus was only the Latinized form of the titular deity, and his Roman equivalent was Caelus. In 1789, Bode's Royal Academy colleague, Martin Klaproth, named his newly discovered element uranium in support of Bode's choice. Ultimately, Bode's suggestion became the most widely used and became universal in 1850, when H.M. Nautical Almanac Office, the final holdout, switched from using Georgium Sidus to Uranus. Wow, that's crazy. All right, I'm not going to read all about the axial tilt and the internal structure. It's not important. But I think it's hilarious that so much controversy was stirred up because someone discovered a planet. Like, it's crazy to me how many opposers there were at the time and how silly that is at the end of the day. Dude, if you're following a scientific method, then what you find is going to be reliable. He talked to astronomers all over Europe and they all agreed, yeah, that's what that is. And once you discovered another planet, then you discovered another planet. Like, whether people like it or not, this is truth. Yeah. So I don't understand religion objecting to it. I think that's a little silly. Anyway, I found that fascinating. Did you find that as fascinating as I did? So what do you think? Is it unreasonable to expect to find new planets, or is it just a normal part of life? And that's how I see it. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the Microfiche time capsule today, and make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.